Welcome and thanks for joining us today. You are listening to the Restoria Podcast produced by Lower Columbia Preservation Society. LCPS protects historic structures and sites, promotes active stewardship of historic properties, and supports preservation education in the Lower Columbia region of Oregon and Washington. Restoria Podcast is pleased to bring you a variety of local voices today as we discuss vault lights. Enjoy. Hi, I'm Miss Ray, the Lower Columbia Preservation Society intern, and today I'm here with Paul Caruana, the owner of the Astor and the Norblad Building. So Paul, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really well, thanks.
Great. So how long have you lived here in Astoria?
Well, without saying my age, 49, I was born here in 1970.
So how long have you owned the Astor and Norblad Building for?
I think the Astor building was first. I think it was 2007, and then the Norblad was shortly after. I think it might have been 2008.
Yes, and you've taken on several large preservation, restoration, and reuse projects here in Astoria. So do you ever have to make a lot of difficult decisions about the historic material that you can salvage and restore and what needs to be replaced?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's always a struggle because there are so many details on these buildings in particular. They're heavily detailed, very ornate, and so it just, it complicates the whole restoration process. But it's never really a struggle, not normally, like what to keep. I mean, most of it we do keep, and we keep everything we can. Some of the other challenges are just, like gently modifying properties so they accommodate the way people live today and, accessibility and things like that while still maintaining, the historic nature of the building.
Yes, and recently you had the vault light panels removed in front of the Norblad Building. So can you sort of describe the condition that these panels were in? Were they leaking? Were they loose? What was the condition of them?
Those particular light panels were probably the worst ones of anything we owned because many of them were in two pieces and they were sagging in the middle, and so there were wooden posts in the basement supporting those. So I didn't even realize that, but when you went under the sidewalk and looked, because I wondered what held these things up because they were precarious. When you went in the basement, you could see kind of makeshift wooden structures that were used to support or to further secure them. They were by far the worst ones around the buildings. If you want me to elaborate, the big issue with them, they leaked a lot. And people didn't walk over them. I noticed that around the Norblad, that people walked around the light blocks or the light wells because you could tell they looked, they were sagging. But the issue is the water goes through those. I think even when they're in good condition, the water goes through those and it erodes the rebar, not only in the sidewalk structure, but also in the building that the sidewalks abut. And so what we've done thousands of dollars of repairs to the Astor building where that water has gotten under the structure and damaged the concrete. So, water infiltration is always a challenge around here.
So how bad was the condition of the actual panels? Was it sort of on its last legs a little bit?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They were beyond repair. I did work with an engineering firm and came up with a design to replace them using plate steel and new glass blocks, and that was the direction I was leaning toward. But I hate to say cost prohibitive, but it was very expensive. And when we met with the waterproofing company, they said that similar repairs done in Portland have to be maintained annually. So it's not kind of a fix it once and done. It's fix it once and then continue to maintain it. So that's really where I was just weighing, like, what's the value of these blocks, to aesthetically. We don't need them for light. Obviously, we have just lights in the basement, LED lights. But just aesthetically, what's the value to the building? And although I'd love to keep them, when you consider annual costs of maintaining buildings around here, maintaining this, just adding that to it it's a lot.
Yeah, and what was the decision process like when deciding to remove your panels? Did you have to talk with the city first, or was there somebody that you talked it over with?
Well, the first thing I did before, possibly even before talking to the city, was I thought I'd come up with a good plan for replacing them, like a new style, something that's stronger than what was there. Because what's there really, there's like a shelf around the sidewalk, and then on that shelf, that ledge, sits these concrete panels with the light blocks. The problem is there's not a lot of structure. There's so many light blocks, there's very little concrete structure, so that makes them a little precarious. So the first thing I did was met with the engineer, and then I don't know that I met with anybody at the city. It was mostly just phone calls, and it had to do really with public works. Since it's a sidewalk and there's right-of-way, we had to get permission and permits from, I think it was Public Works.
So did the city have much to say about the removal of the vault light panels? Was there a discussion, or what was it that they were saying?
Nobody said anything. I mean, I did hear from someone that our city manager, Brett Estes, really likes the light blocks, and I do too. I mean, so that was the only thing I heard from the city. Otherwise, it was fairly smooth. We just had to apply with Public Works, and we had to supply engineering to show how we were going to fix it. And then the engineer had to sign off during the process of repairs. The engineer came and inspected the process before we poured the concrete.
Is that how the panels were filled in with concrete?
Yeah, I mean, it's, as an example, the 3 light wells in front of Lagom on Exchange Street, those light wells were about 14 feet above our basement floor. So had someone fallen through one of those, it would have been a 14-foot fall. So yeah, it's a pretty involved and serious, it's definitely a safety concern when you're doing this repair. So they put in a lid, like a temporary lid underneath, put in steel, drilled into the sidewalk, and then they pour the concrete, and then they remove that temporary lid from the basement. So I can't remember actually if those, I think they're between 4 and 6 inches thick, the new concrete.
Oh, wow. And what was your reaction to seeing the panels taken out? Did you have a little bit of mixed emotions, maybe?
Yeah. It's that mix. I mean, you look on the sidewalk and it feels a little boring, because it's like, it's nice to see the new concrete. It feels and looks like it's stable. I miss that little historic piece, like at nighttime, when there's lights in the basement, you can see them shining through the blocks. It's really cool. But what I notice is, for the first time, is seeing crowds walking on Duane Street. They just walk right alongside the building where they used to crowd toward the street. People, like I said earlier, people just avoided walking on those.
And what was it that happened with the removed panels? Were they preserved in any way?
A rather peculiar man by the name of J.D. Jeff Daly. He took him, and I'm sure he's going to do something with him. Had he not taken him, there was one in particular that I wanted because it had like an old bronze, very small plaque on it from the original installation. Yeah, and those are really cool. And you find those all through these buildings as we're opening things up and making repairs. We find steel brackets on wood beams and things, and they all have these stamps, like sort of where they were proudly made. So those are fun things to keep.
Yes, and there are also vault light panels over at the Astor building. So can you sort of describe to our listeners the condition of those ones? Are they mainly intact? Are there some broken?
Those are mainly intact. I mean, some of the glass blocks themselves, like all over downtown, are crushed and could probably more easily be repaired. They're also a lot smaller. The panels around the Astor, I think, are 4 foot square, and the ones around the Norblad, some of them were twice that size. And so they were done in 2 panels, and where they met in the middle, they were breaking down and sagging. So, and actually a lot of the panels around the Astor and even the Norblad had been replaced already with concrete, so there are very few around the Astor that are the originals. And actually only 2 sides of the Astor has a sidewalk underneath it. The south side of the Astor is built over dirt, so there's no glass blocks, but there used to be light wells that used to let light into the basement. So, but those have been gone since before I bought the building.
So what could have happened if these panels were still left at the Norblad Building?
Well, some of our friends and neighbors might be found in the basement sometime in the future. I mean, there was absolutely no saving. Most of those panels were so far like I said, they were the only thing, well, I'm assuming the only thing holding them up were these posts that someone had put into the basement, before I bought it. Yeah, they were far gone. So they would have had to have been completely replaced. And that was that engineering project I had going earlier on, was a complete replacement to make them look similar to the way they look, but done better.
Yeah, and about how long did this project take?
I think I hired the engineer probably a year ago, and it was, I always knew it was going to be a big project, and I wasn't in a hurry to do it only because of the cost. Even what we did was fairly expensive. The similar, replacing with glass blocks similar to the way it was would have been, easily 3 times what we did spend.
Does the sidewalk feel a little bit more safe now that they've been removed?
I mean, I think so. I mean, I walk on the new panels and I did not walk on the old panels, so if that tells you anything.
So if there was a way to have sort of a stamp in the sidewalk saying that there were belt lights there, how would you feel about that? Do you have any thoughts on this idea? Do you think that'd be something you'd be interested in, or does it feel sort of unnecessary?
Like a little plaque or something?
Yeah.
Like buried into the concrete?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like something saying like, oh, this is like a historical place where they had ball lights.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that could be cool. I mean, we did have that small plaque I mentioned, that came off. I don't know if that would be reused, but I hear what you're saying. Yeah, it's fun sometimes to walk through and just see, indications of what was. Because I'm sure people have questions as they walk through, seeing the different type of concrete where patches have been done. A lot of people have taken out those old hoists that used to bring products in and out of the basements, and that's what a lot of the patches around town are that are near the street's edge. Or those old metal, doors that used to open up, and it was kind of a hoist would bring products in and out of the basement.
And you've been underneath the panels before, so can you sort of describe a little bit about what it's like when you look up from the basement? Can you see any light coming in?
Yeah, there's actually quite a bit of light. As a matter of fact, there's so much light and so much water that comes in. There are ferns growing underneath them, all around them, and moss and everything else. So, yeah, there's like an ecosystem underneath some of them, especially the ones we removed because so much water came in. And dirt and things off the sidewalk, that it leaves dirt deposits down on the ground, so much so that they actually start growing plants.
Yes, and do you have any suggestions of other ways the Preservation Society or the Astoria Downtown Historic District Association could help assist property owners who want to maintain their sidewalk vault lights?
Mm-hmm. Well, I do have engineering for replacing, future ones if people want to lift the concrete out and put in 3/4-inch plate steel that's been plasma cut to receive each of these glass blocks. And it's a cool design. It's very simple. But I think, the sidewalks all over Astoria are kind of an interesting thing because they were built, I believe, by the state, or maybe it's a combination of the state and the city. So you have these sidewalks constructed by others, and the building owners next to those sidewalks, I believe, are responsible for maintaining and repairing them. So it's kind of a tough thing because, a property owner doesn't really benefit from the sidewalk, but you have to maintain them. And they are in really poor shape in a lot of areas because the sidewalks kind of float, they're not solid underneath. So all the traffic going through town and rattles around, and so it contributes to the deterioration of the sidewalks and the light panels. So it'd be great if there was some sort of a program where, property owners could be incentivized, or it could be a joint project with a property owner and tax dollars, really. I mean, because that's who uses the sidewalks are people, citizens, pedestrians, and travelers, and so it's difficult in a town with such aging buildings to put all of the responsibility on a property owner to maintain something that they didn't build, and they don't really own it either. So yeah, some help would be, that would go a long ways, I think, in encouraging people to upgrade their sidewalks, maybe some grants, some partnerships or something.
Do you have anything else that you'd like to share with us about vault lights?
Yeah, it's, I don't know. I'm having fun with them. I mean, the Norblads went through a lot of transformations, a lot of updates, and, it's the big issue around here is keeping the water out. It was funny, I asked Siri, I don't know if they're related, Google and Siri, but I don't think so. I asked Siri the other day how much it rained in Portland. Actually, I started in Bend, and I think it was 12 inches a year. And Portland said it was 40 inches a year. In Astoria, it's 86 inches a year. In a rainforest, I believe technically starts at 80 inches a year. So we live in a rainforest. And it's really funny sometimes, when people from Portland say, well, how much worse could it be in Astoria? I mean, it rains a lot in Portland. It's hard to fathom raining twice as much as Portland, but that's about, from little bits of research I've done, it rains about 70% to 100+% more than Portland. So it's hard to keep that kind of water and wind-driven rain out of buildings, the windows and mortar and sidewalks. So it's a constant challenge.
And how do you go about getting the water out of the basement, if there ever is any?
I mean, we've been just putting a lot of efforts into keeping that from happening. So our basements are not wet except for under the sidewalks, primarily around these light wells and where there are cracks in the sidewalk. So we've filled the cracks. We've done everything we could, on short of replacing the light blocks until recently, and we've done that too. So,
well, thank you so much, Paul, for speaking with me today and talking a little bit about the business side of owning a building with vault lights. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for taking an interest.
And that does it for this episode of the Restoria Podcast, produced by Lower Columbia Preservation Society. For more information on vault lights and other topics, please visit lcpsociety.org and consider becoming an LCPS member. Thank you for listening.